Good evening, and welcome to the 31st Annual Henry L. Stimson Award Ceremony. My name is Mark Hellerer. I'm the chair of the Stimson Medal Committee, a retired partner at Pillsbury, and a former AUSA in the Southern District. Tonight is a really special night because it marks the 31st time that the City Bar Association has honored the men and women of the U.S. Attorney's Office in both the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York for their outstanding dedication, their sacrifices, and their service, not only to the City of New York, but to the nation. And we do this by honoring two Assistant U.S. Attorneys, one from the Civil Division and one from the Criminal Division in each office, for upholding the best traditions of excellence and integrity established by Henry L. Stimson starting back in 1906, well over 100 years ago. First, it's my honor to introduce the winners and the speakers. Our keynote speaker tonight is the Honorable Eric Komitee from the Eastern District Court. Our presenter is Susan Kohlmann, the president of the City Bar Association. And our winners are, to my left, Bonnie Perlin from the Civil Division in the Eastern District. And Christopher Caffrone, also from the Eastern District Criminal Division. And on my right, Rebecca Saltinio from the Civil Division in the Southern District. And Tara Lamort from the Criminal Division in the Southern District. And we welcome you here tonight, colleagues, friends, leaders in both offices, friends, and family. Next, permit me to start with a brief background on the Stimson Medal. The medal was initiated by the Bar Association in 1992, and it honors the memory of Henry L. Stimson, who was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 1906 to 1909. He was appointed by Teddy Roosevelt. Stimson later continued his distinguished career in public service, serving 3 presidents as Secretary of War, President Taft, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and President Truman, and also 1 term as Secretary of State for President Hoover. As Felix Frankfurter, one of Stimson's first assistants at the United States Attorney, stated in his oral history, Stimson, and I quote, inherited an office which by tradition, up till that time, was, with negligible exceptions, manned by hacks and mere job holders. To address that situation, Stimson radically changed the system and professionalized the office. He asked the deans of leading law schools to recommend to him promising recent graduates. And then he tripled the staff by paying salaries 1/3 the previous size, and counted on the rewards of public service to attract enthusiastic and able young attorneys. The standards of excellence and integrity on which he insisted remain the hallmark of the offices today in both the Southern and Eastern District. And it's that tradition we honor here tonight. The award was initiated in 1992, and Ted Clark, a former president of the City Bar Association, was the moving force. He was an outstanding litigator at the Winthrop Stimson law firm, and he actually worked with Stimson as a young associate. Sadly, Ted passed away just a few years ago. The purpose of the award is to honor Stimson's memory and to promote the principles that he initiated at the U.S. Attorney's Office. These principles, which are the criteria for determining the award, are as follows: outstanding contributions to the public service, absolute integrity, candor and fairness in dealing with adversaries in the court, highly developed professional skills, personal courage, and conviction. The medal itself was created specifically for this award. It is cast from a sculpture by Paul Manship, which is maintained at the Century Club. and it's supported by a contribution by the firm of Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, which is a successor to the Stimson law firm. The members of the committee include the president of the City Bar Association, Susan Kohlmann, our executive director, Brett Parker, the chair of the Federal Courts Committee, which is Richard Hong, a partner at Morrison Cohen, Carolina Fornos, a partner at Pillsbury, Rich Donahue, another partner at Pillsbury. And unfortunately, today is the first time in the 31 years of the award that Steve Weiner, a former partner, retired partner at the Pillsbury firm, who was the original chairman of this firm, passed away several weeks ago. And we're very sad to have to announce that. He was a tremendous proponent of the award, and as I said, was the original chair. The selections are based on nominations from the U.S. Attorney's offices, and we wish to thank the U.S. Attorneys and their staff for their participation, in particular Judy Phillips and Carl Metzner, who have been of great assistance in this. And believe me, it's always a very difficult task for the committee because all the nominees are really terrific, and it's very, very difficult to make the decision. Last, before proceeding, let me take just a few minutes to review some of our past winners and their truly extraordinary accomplishments since they received the award. Many have continued their great work in the Southern and Eastern districts in leadership positions, and many are here today. Others have taken responsibility at major law firms and public companies. Still others have gone on to public service positions, and that's what we'd like to mention a few. On the bench, Judge Richard Sullivan serves on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. 3 winners, Kathy Seibel, Paul Gardefee, and Valerie Caproni, serve as judges on the Southern District bench. Recently, Margaret Garnett has been nominated to join them on the Southern District Court. Sean Lane and David Jones serve as Southern District bankruptcy judges, and James Cott serves as a magistrate judge in the Southern District, and Cheryl Pollack in the Eastern District. U.S. Attorneys. 3 of our Stimson Medal Award winners, Alan Weingrad, James Comey, and David Kelly, went on to become U.S. Attorney for the Eastern or Southern District of New York. And a 4th, Richard Donahue, served as the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District, and then as Principal Deputy Attorney General before becoming Acting Deputy Attorney General at the Justice Department. And you may all recall seeing his testimony before the January 6th House Committee. Patrick Fitzgerald formerly served as the U.S. Attorney in Chicago. Department of Justice officials. Marshall Miller serves as Principal Deputy Attorney General in the Department of Justice. Leslie Caldwell served as the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division at the Department of Justice and head of the Enron Task Force. Greg Andres, Jack Smith, Sung-Hee Soo, and David Bitkower formerly held top spots in the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. Andrew Goldsmith, Zainab Ahmad, along with Greg Andres, served as members of the Robert Mueller Special Counsel Investigation Team. And Rob Kuzami served as head of the Enforcement Division at the SEC and then as Deputy U.S. Attorney in the Southern District. State and local officials, Eric Korngold and Dieter Snell held leadership positions at the New York Attorney General's office. Richard Weber was the General Counsel of the New York State Department of Financial Services. Elizabeth Glazer served as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And Lisa Thornburg recently became Chief Counsel to Mayor Adams, succeeding another winner, Brendan McGuire. Last, several winners have actually taken on national significance. As many of you know, one of our first winners was James Comey, who served as Director of the FBI and Deputy Attorney General at the Justice Department. And finally, Jack Smith is the Special Counsel leading the January 6th and classified information prosecutions of Donald J. Trump. So as you can see, our winners tonight are a highly selective group of dedicated public servants. So let's begin. It's my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Eric R. Komitee, United States District Judge in the Eastern District of New York. Judge Komitee graduated from the NYU School of Law, cum laude, where he served as a senior editor of the NYU Law Review. after receiving his undergraduate degree at Emory University with high honors. Following law school, Judge Komitee served as a law clerk to the Honorable J.L. Edmondson of the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. From 1996 to 1998, he was an associate in the corporate department at Cravath, Swaine & Moore, focusing on securities underwriting and mergers and acquisitions transactions. He then moved on to Skadden Arps, where he specialized in regulatory compliance and white-collar criminal matters from 1998 to 2000. From 2000 to 2008, this is the best part of his career, Judge Komitee was an assistant United States attorney in the Eastern District of New York, eventually becoming the chief of the Business and Securities Fraud section. After leaving the office, he became the general counsel of Viking Global Investors and a member of its management committee for 11 years. In that capacity, he oversaw legal compliance and regulatory matters for the firm. Judge Komitee took the bench in December 2019. So he brings a very valuable perspective to our proceedings, based not only on his time on the bench and in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but also from his years in private practice and as a corporate executive. Please join me in welcoming Judge Komitee.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone. I'm honored to be here to celebrate this very important event, and I congratulate tonight's honorees. From the Southern District, as you heard, Rebecca Saltinio and Tara Lamort, and from the Eastern District, Bonnie Perlin and Christopher Caffarone. So as Mark just mentioned, I was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District for 8 years. After I left the office, I was in the private sector for about a decade, and I've now been back in Brooklyn as a judge for 3 years in change. As I started to contemplate my remarks for tonight, it occurred to me that this would be the first time since I left the U.S. Attorney's Office that I've been invited to speak to a room mostly filled with assistant U.S. attorneys. I then realized that's not precisely true. Shortly after I got back to the Eastern District, I was invited by Cheryl Pollack, who at the time was the chief magistrate judge, to judge a bake-off at the U.S. Attorney's Office. That was a momentous occasion and a lot of pressure because I actually had to pick the award winners that night, unlike tonight, but not quite an opportunity to step back and reflect on the role of the prosecutor the way tonight traditionally has been. So tonight is my opportunity to offer a few words on that subject from the vantage point of somebody who spent a lot of time in the U.S. Attorney's Office, then left and had time to reflect with some distance on my time as a prosecutor, and has now been back in the judicial system in my current capacity. At the risk of stating the obvious, the job of an assistant U.S. attorney in this country is an extraordinary role. Every person in that job, every assistant U.S. attorney in this room is working to uphold a value system, a system in which prosecutors do not take direction from politicians regarding who to prosecute or how to prosecute them. That is rare in this world. That is rare in this world. Our system of working to insulate prosecutors from political oversight was unique when it was invented, and I'm still not sure, despite the number of functioning democracies in the world, that there is any other nation we would trust as much to carry out the prosecution function in the way we do here. It's not just politics, as you know, that can infect the prosecution function. It's any number of things. One of them is often ambition. There are so many incidents, and we've seen so many lately, of people losing their way in the fight to get somewhere in life, to think of themselves as important, to be a success, whatever that means. Here in Brooklyn and Manhattan, in the U.S. Attorney's offices, instead of that, we have people who put in enormous amounts of time to give effect to the values behind American law, and who do so at such obvious cost to themselves, both the cost in personal finances in a city where they're surrounded by many people who spend their entire lives in the relentless pursuit of money, even when those people don't need to earn any more money for themselves or their families. And they pay obvious costs in time away from their family and friends. People are talking a lot these days about democracy and what it takes to sustain it, freedom and what it takes to sustain the freedoms that we have. And it is often observed that freedom and democracy need to be reinvigorated every generation. And that is surely true of our prosecutorial traditions as well. These traditions are not self-sustaining. They take generations of hardworking, ethical, and committed prosecutors to reinvigorate them over and over again. And it's my intention tonight, having been in the U.S. Attorney's Office for some time myself, and as I said, having had some time away to think through that part of my career, it's my intention tonight, humbly, to suggest a few areas of focus in that reinvigoration effort. The important choices that prosecutors face are often not binary, right? Binary choice would be either do X or don't do X. Instead, the choices that prosecutors face are what I would think of as dial-setting exercises. Where do you set the dial on a particular question between two extremes? So defense lawyers, just by way of example, in a bail matter, have one job, really, which is to keep their client out of jail pending trial. And there's tremendous honor in that, and we regularly recognize defense lawyers for the great work that they do in these districts. Prosecutors, in the context of bail, have the obligation to seek remand for a defendant who is a danger to the community or a risk of flight, and just as strong a duty not to seek remand for people who are not dangers to the community and not risks of flight. And that balancing act is what makes the prosecutor's job, I think, so rich, but also at times so difficult. So let me just talk briefly about four particular dials that I see among the very many dials on the prosecutor's dashboard. The first and most obvious dial, and the one I think it's most incumbent on me to mention, is obviously the ethics dial. That one, as Mark discussed, and as we honor through the Stimson Medal, you do want to set at one extreme. There's no binary thought process when it comes to ethics, and to paraphrase the movie Spinal Tap, prosecutors want to crank that dial up to 11 and leave it there. Every USA who's been before me has done that in my experience so far. I remember a conversation when I was in AUSA with Steve Pekin, who I think had left the Southern District by that time, where he said the most important part of the Brady analysis for him was the 5-minute rule, which holds that if you spent more than 5 minutes talking about whether a particular document is exculpatory or not exculpatory, that's the end of the conversation, and you should just turn it over. Things like that, I think, are well ingrained in the U.S. Attorney's offices, but the difficulty in setting the ethics dial and resetting it from time to time is that the bar for ethics rises over time. I'll say that again. The bar for ethics rises over time. It's customary when people are gathered to award the Stimson Medal to talk about Mr. Stimson himself and some of his important innovations as a prosecutor in the Southern District. And I watched a couple of the judges who spoke at award ceremonies in the last couple of years talking about Mr. Stimson. And among his ethical innovations, not everything he did, but among his innovations, he dictated that assistant U.S. attorneys who succeeded in securing the forfeiture of assets would no longer be able to keep those assets personally. And And he succeeded in dictating that the assistant U.S. attorneys who worked for him would not be allowed to take civil cases on contingency in a private capacity while they worked for him as AUSAs. So as I say, the bar for ethics is always rising. That was enough in 1919 or whatever year exactly we're talking about to get a medal named after you and people talking about you 115 years later. I would suggest that today that is the floor, not the ceiling. But the point is that to function ethically in a changing world will sometimes require innovation. And some of these innovations are ones that go to the heart of the prosecutor's job description. Innovations that concern not only how you do your job, but how you think of the job that you're doing as a whole. And to give a moment of credit to the defense lawyers who I see in the Eastern District, the federal defenders in particular, since I left the office in 2008, they have started, as I'm sure all of you know, but that as I was relatively surprised to learn when I came back, they now have social workers on staff at the Federal Defender's Office, and those social workers are heavily involved in putting together, in connection with sentencing proceedings for criminal defendants, reentry plans that tell the federal judge, here is the plan for this person's reintegration into society after they leave incarceration, if that's part of the sentence that is to be imposed here today. That was not, in my experience, in 04, 05, 06, a standard part of the job description of the federal defender or the federal defender's office. And I suggest that those kinds of innovations that sometimes move the outer contours of the job description are very, very important. Which brings me to the second dial that I want to mention today, which is the skepticism dial. The dial that decides how much will I take for granted the truth or accuracy of what is just either being told to me or even just being presumed by everybody around me, and how much will I interrogate those truths from a first principles perspective. And I want to tell a very short story here about a lawyer I came across in my last job when I was in the private sector in the investment management private funds industry. This was an incredibly smart lawyer, a lawyer with a platinum-plated educational pedigree. She had gone to elite college, elite law school, had fantastic reasoning abilities. Before she got to the funds industry, she had worked at a large broker-dealer. This is in 05, 06, 07. And her job, both in private practice as an associate before that and at this broker-dealer, was packaging mortgage-backed securities, residential and commercial mortgage-backed securities. And in a candid moment, she told me that it had never occurred to her, while she was toiling away putting together securitizations of these instruments, that she was building financial instruments that might one day blow up the world economy. Never even occurred to her, not only that might blow up the world economy, but even that there was something potentially troubling about the practice. And I would say to every assistant U.S. attorney in this room, never allow yourself to be in that position where it turns out only with hindsight that you realize that you've been involved in a practice that you would no longer underwrite, knowing what you know later. Step back periodically, go back to first principles and ask, what is the big picture here, and how is the work that I am doing fitting into that picture? And do that regardless of how many smart and good people are engaged in whatever practice you're thinking about alongside you. The fact that people are extremely smart does not insulate them from participation in things that they later regret. The third dial I'll mention is the dial of work-life balance. Unlike the ethics style, you can't just crank this one to 11. And this one is personal. No one, surely not me sitting here, can tell an assistant U.S. attorney precisely where to set the dial on work-life balance. It depends on commitments that you've made outside the office, to family, to friends, and otherwise. But what I can tell you is you will most likely never have another opportunity in your lives like the opportunity you have as an AUSA. An opportunity to do at least two kinds of things. One, to improve the world, and two, to learn your craft as a trial attorney. That's obvious to me now, having left the U.S. Attorney's Office and worked in private practice. It might not, I think, be so obvious to somebody who came to the U.S. Attorney's Office only a few years out of law school and has been there the entire time. I certainly thought, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that my opportunities to make change in the world and to learn my craft as a lawyer would continue apace at whatever I did next and whatever I did after that. And I'm here to tell you today that that is not the case. Those things will not be true of every job you have. And so every extra hour you can invest in your work as an AUSA, I submit that that's an hour that will pay substantial dividends down the line. The fourth and final dial that I'll just mention is the question of adversarial litigation style versus cooperative litigation style. And I'll tell a story about that one too, which is that I had a case when I was at the Eastern District of New York where the defendants were represented by a relative who's who of prominent trial lawyers in the defense bar. And one of them, who came into the case fairly late to represent this defendant number 8 or 9 after the case had been going on for 6 months or a year, was Jerry Shargell, who's since passed away, but who was I think it's fair to say, legendary defense lawyer in New York. Jerry Shargell was retained to represent a defendant who we had newly indicted in a superseding indictment, and he called me, pretty standard first call between defense lawyer and AUSA, just to say he was coming into the case, to ask me the usual questions about how I saw his client in the landscape of the bigger case, to ask me about discovery and where the case stood. And then at the end of our conversation, which was brief, Jerry concluded by saying, "I look forward to working with you on this case." And that was very puzzling to me. I thought for a second when he said, "I look forward to working with you," that he was suggesting that his client was going to cooperate, even before he'd seen the discovery. That was surely not the case. But I was just not used to hearing defense lawyers talk about working with a prosecutor rather than working adversarially in our adversarial system. So his comments were confusing, but they were very much true in some ways, and I would suggest some important ways. Defense attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys are surely not purely colleagues. We do have an adversarial system, but they're not pure adversaries either. And it's only really since I've been on the bench that this has emerged to me as clearly as I think I see it now. There's more going on in a criminal case, obviously, than the determination of whether a defendant is guilty or not guilty. There are things like concerns over the conditions of confinement for a defendant who's being held without bail pending trial, and concerns even under that in the taxonomy, like the delivery of medical care to prisoners incarcerated at the MDC. And I've had a couple cases in which I expressed on the record substantial concerns about the quality of medical care being delivered to defendants awaiting trial. I would suggest here that in setting the dial on adversarial litigation versus cooperative endeavors, there really is no substantial difference between the role of an AUSA and the role of a defense lawyer in getting to the bottom of a question like whether a defendant who is still presumed innocent, who is awaiting trial, is getting adequate medical care at the MDC while he or she awaits trial. And I'm pleased to say, extremely pleased to say, that in those couple of cases that I'm thinking of right now, the AUSAs have endeavored, it seems to me, as diligently as the defense has to get to the bottom of whether adequate medical care is being denied, and if so, why, and how to rectify that situation. So let me leave you by just reiterating the thought that I started with, which is that for the AUSAs in the room, and especially for our honorees here today who have distinguished themselves so much in the AUSA role, this is an extraordinary position in which you find yourselves. I would urge you all to be intentional about how you define the role instead of just taking the role as you find it, to look closely at all the dials on the dashboard in front of you and to adjust them constantly as needed. You may find an opportunity to innovate in some way that may not seem so obviously necessary right now, but will seem incredibly obvious to people looking at the prosecutor's function years from now, the way we look at Mr. Stimson's innovations from early last century. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Judge. It's now my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend Susan Kohlmann, the president of the New York City Bar Association. Susan is a graduate of Yale University and Columbia University School of Law. She is currently a partner at Jenner & Block, where, until recently, she was the managing partner of the New York office. She is an active intellectual property litigator and trial lawyer and serves as co-chair of Jenner's trademark, advertising, and unfair competition practice. Susan has a truly incredible record of pro bono work. Until a few months ago, she served as the chair of the board of directors of the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, and previously she served as a board member and chair of Legal Services NYC. Given her extraordinary record as a trial lawyer, law firm administrator, and pro bono leader, it is no wonder that last year she was selected as the New York Law Journal's Attorney of the Year. Please welcome Susan.
Good evening. I am Susan Kohlmann, president of the New York City Bar. Thank you so much, Judge Committee, for your really insightful remarks. And our gratitude, as always, to my friend, Mark Hellerer, the Stimson Medal Committee, and the firm of Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, Henry Stimson's legacy firm, for maintaining this joyful annual celebration of achievement in the public interest. I personally always look forward to this presentation for a couple of reasons. One is to see and meet the rising stars of the Eastern and Southern District. Make no mistake about it, as Mark explained, the names you hear today will likely become as familiar as those of many of the previous Stimson Medal recipients who are handling some of the biggest cases and government investigations of our time. When the New York City Bar Association launched this award 31 years ago, it was decided that the medal would honor and celebrate the following attributes in Assistant U.S. attorneys: integrity, fairness, courage, and public service. Each of these qualities resonates even more, with more meaning today, and perhaps the quality of courage more so than the rest. And that's because in these times, when the justice system seems so politicized, sometimes perhaps in bad faith for propaganda purposes, those in the position of our honorees must be prepared to bear the burden of hatred and threats of violence for doing nothing more than their jobs, for doing the right thing, for doing the work of justice. Hatred towards those who carry out the work of the justice system has come from across the political spectrum throughout history. Hatred is one thing. Speech is, after all, speech. But threats of violence, the city bar has a long history of speaking out about violence and intimidation against judges and prosecutors overseas. In my first year as president of the city bar, it was astonishing to me how many letters and positions we had to take about threats of violence and against prosecutors and judges outside the United States. It is distressing and worrisome to find ourselves having to speak out against violence and intimidation here at home in recent years. The point is this: threats against prosecutors and judges or incitement to violence against them must not be tolerated, not overseas, not here, not anywhere, and not by anyone, without exception. And that brings me to the second reason why I look forward to this event. In this grand setting, in this wonderful room, in person, happily, with the august group of honorees we have here tonight, past and present awardees, and with all of you gathered here to honor them, I think there is comfort and sustenance to be drawn from this gathering as we deliberately, together, celebrate the pursuit of justice and the rule of law. In this event, we implicitly acknowledge that the rule of law does not uphold itself, that it is people, all of you, who make the wheels of justice turn, people who in good faith do the right thing, adhering to principles of fairness and equality at the very heart of our justice system and our democracy. People who perform public service with integrity, with fairness, and yes, with courage. People like tonight's honorees. And so with that, it is my distinct honor and delight to present this year's Henry L. Stimson medals. So we're now getting to the best part. And I am going to start with Bonnie Perlin. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of the honorees, and then they're going to come up and maybe share a few thoughts. Bonnie obtained her BA in political science from Binghamton University in 1995 and graduated cum laude from the Washington College of Law at American University in 2000, simultaneously earning a Master's of Science in Accounting. Following law school, Bonnie served as a trial attorney in the Department of Justice's Tax Division Civil Trial Section. Since joining the Eastern District as an AUSA in the Civil Division in 2008, Bonnie has successfully handled a wide variety of significant cases and has held key supervisory positions that include her current roles as Chief of Affirmative Civil Enforcement and team leader of the office's Consumer Protection Team, as well as former roles as Bankruptcy Chief and Civil Elder Fraud Coordinator. She also helps to oversee the EDNY Civil Initiative to Reduce Gun Violence. Bonnie has handled a wide variety of significant financial fraud cases, including the following. Bonnie served as a team leader for the Eastern District of New York and Northern District of Georgia team of AUSAs and staff that investigated and filed suit in the United States versus UBS Securities, a major reverse mortgage bond securities fraud matter. In 2018, After 4 years of investigation, the team filed suit against UBS, alleging that the bank defrauded investors worldwide by making false and misleading statements to 40 RMBS buyers regarding the characteristics of billions of dollars of mortgage loans underlying the securities. Bonnie and the UBS team recently reached a settlement agreement in which UBS paid the United States a staggering $1.435 billion to resolve the claims. Bonnie also played a key role in a multi-year mortgage fraud investigation in which David Gotterup and Jason Green pled guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire fraud, and bank fraud. Gotterup was sentenced to 135 months in prison and to pay $2.7 million to over 1,000 distressed homeowners who were victims of the loan modification fraud scheme, and $2.5 million in forfeiture. Green was sentenced to time served and also had to pay $1.5 million in restitution. In 2019, Bonnie was appointed Chief of Affirmative Civil Enforcement. As ACE Chief, I like that name, Bonnie oversees a substantial body of affirmative civil cases. Under Bonnie's supervision, the office's ACE practice has led some of the most significant cases in the country and achieved recognition as a leader within the Department of Justice. That's not all. Bonnie supervised and led the Office of Consumer Protection Branch's joint litigation of the U.S. versus John Cohen, I may not be pronouncing that correctly, and United States versus Nicholas Palumbo, two first-of-their-kind fraud injunction actions filed against defendant voice-over internet protocol carriers and their principals. Following the court's entry of a temporary restraining order in both cases, Bonnie and the team negotiated consent decrees against 5 individuals and entities, permanently enjoining them from operating their businesses. Of note, in the months following the filing of these 2 cases, and you're all going to really appreciate this, the number of robocalls that reached U.S. consumers sharply declined. Bonnie also supervised the office's filing of complaints and consent motions for permanent injunction in 3 cases in which the defendants were alleged to have used ticket bots, fictitious accounts, multiple credit cards, proxy or spoofed IP addresses to purchase event tickets. Oh yes, those Taylor Swift concert tickets, exceeding the amount limit from Ticketmaster, and resold the tickets on secondary markets at a significant price markup. These were the very first enforcement actions brought by DOJ under the Better Online Ticket Sales Act. In March 2022, the office announced the formation of a consumer protection team comprising 6 Civil Division AUSAs under Bonnie's leadership. Notably, the day after the consumer protection team was announced, the team filed its very first enforcement action in United States versus B4B Earth Tea, a case in which the U.S. alleges the defendants engaged in deceptive practices in the sale of an herbal tea that purportedly treats or prevents COVID-19. As you have heard, Bonnie is an exceptional AUSA. She's working on those dials that the judge mentioned. She's an exceptional AUSA, she's an exceptional investigator, and an outstanding advocate and leader. Her dedication, tenacity, and diligence in all aspects of her work make her a truly deserving recipient of this year's 2023 Henry L. Stimson Medal.
This is so nice. Thank you so much for your kind and thoughtful remarks, Susan, Judge Committee. Thank you, Mark, the Stimson Medal Committee, and the New York City Bar for selecting me for this incredible award. Mark, I didn't tell you this earlier, but when I got your voicemail, I just assumed you were calling to refer a case to me or about a lien I had filed many years ago. But I'm just so happy, and I was so surprised, and thank you so much. And congratulations to my fellow Stimson Medal recipients, to Chris, Rebecca, and Tara. I am so incredibly honored to receive this award for doing what I love, and so happy to be able to do so in the company of my dear friends and family. I would not be here today without the support and encouragement of so many people. In the more than 15 years I have been in AUSA and EDNY, I have served under 10 U.S. attorneys. I would like to thank all of them, but in particular, I would like to thank our current U.S. Attorney, Breon Peace, for nominating me for this tremendous award, for prioritizing consumer protection in our district, and for his unwavering support of the UBS team in resolving the final chapter of the department's important RMBS work. I would also like to thank our first assistant, U.S. Attorney Carolyn Picorni, our executive assistant, U.S. Attorney Judy Phillips, and counsel to the U.S. Attorney and my former civil chief, Susan Riley, for your persistent support of me, the ACE practice, and our civil division. Thank you to former U.S. Attorney and acting Deputy Attorney General Rich Donahue for appointing me as ACE Chief in 2019, which is my dream position. Thank you to former U.S. Attorney Ben Campbell for hiring me and for being incredibly kind to me in my early days in the office. Thank you to my civil chief, Joe Maritolo. You have been a wonderful boss and colleague these past several years. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for me and the division, and I'm so proud that I will soon be able to say that I have supervised the ACE work of not one but two magistrate judges in our district. Thank you to my supervisor of more than a dozen years, Deputy Civil Chief Rich Hayes, for believing in me, for consistently challenging me, and for your friendship. And thanks for rolling up your sleeves and joining us in the trenches of the UBS case and substantially helping us get to the finish line. Thank you to ACE Paralegal Extraordinaire Loanne Nguyen. Loanne, you have been an incredible partner to work with and have taught me so much. Thank you to my fellow consumer protection team colleagues, Melanie Spate, David Cooper, Mike Bloom, my office neighbor, Kevin Yim, and a former team member, Mike Castiglione, who recently transferred to our criminal division. Mike, you are one of the most gifted litigators I have ever known. Thank you for the blood, sweat, and tears you poured into UBS and for being an amazing colleague and friend. Thank you to all of the talented, hardworking attorneys, paralegals, legal assistants, analysts, investigators, auditors, and interns that I have had the pleasure of working with on UBS, on bankruptcy, ACE, and financial litigation matters. Thanks to ACE Auditor Chris Gambrell, to Melanie Spate and Ed Newman for stepping up and joining the UBS case at a point in time that would have been daunting for most people. Tremendous thanks to our Atlanta colleagues, Austin Hall and Armand Chimian, and to the OG members of our team, especially Jesse Sklarski, Tom Price, and our superstar paralegals, Joseph Tabaz, Danny Shulkin, and Carson Hughes, who is now a special agent with the FBI. I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Simi Prasad, who is here tonight. Thanks so much for your support. Thank you to AUSA Sylvia Schwader, who I was blessed to work with on the Gotterup case. I treasure our friendship. I know you're going to watch this after. Thank you to my wonderful former colleagues at the tax division, especially my former chief, Pat Malarkey, and my colleague and best friend, Karen Wozniak. Thank you to my dear friend and neighbor, Carol DeSantis, who is right here. Thank you, Carol, for your friendship, for the countless home-cooked meals that you made for me when you thought I was working too hard, and for putting up with my background checks. One of the best decisions I ever made was moving into our co-op down the hall from you and 3 minutes walking distance from the office. Thank you to my wonderful father, Ed Perlin, who is right here, who has always been my biggest supporter. It means so much that you came to support me again tonight, Dad. You have been my rock and been there for me my entire career, from my swearing into the bar and my first trial in Central Islip a million years ago at the tax division. Thank you for always believing in me. I love you. Thank you, Myrna, for ensuring my dad would get here tonight and for your friendship and support. Thank you to my mother, Marilyn. I can't believe it will be 6 years this month that she passed. She was the strongest person I have ever known and my biggest cheerleader. Mom, I love you. And last but not least, thank you to my sister, Rachel, who was just a kid when I started my career with the department. Thanks, Rachel, for your love and support and for being excited for me even when you don't really know what I do. I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking about what government service has meant to me. In law school, I had the opportunity to represent taxpayers in tax court cases through my law school's low-income taxpayer clinic. I also volunteered and assisted underprivileged individuals prepare their tax returns. And those experiences really solidified my interest in serving the public in some way. I joined the department as a civil trial attorney in the tax division immediately following law school. So the department is really all I've ever known. My first boss, Pat Malarkey, worked at the tax division for 52 years before retiring in 2018. And I worked with many other colleagues who had worked all or nearly all of their careers with the government. And while I can't predict whether I'll come even close to 52 years, I am extremely proud of my time in the government thus far. My passion, as anyone who knows me, is investigating fraud cases, especially financial frauds, anything with financial statements, bank statements, and accounting. The department has given me the opportunity to serve in many, many different roles, focused at least in part on rooting out fraud. While I loved my time at the tax division, my most meaningful work has been at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I've been able to work on and supervise a wide variety of cases involving fraud that have harmed the public or defrauded government programs. One of my first ACE cases was an investigation of a small lender, which ultimately led me to a group of individuals who had defrauded distressed homeowners facing foreclosure in as many ways as they could get away with. And that was David Gotterup and his colleagues. And in addition to more sophisticated schemes, David Gotterup and his crew were literally taping paper signs to trees advertising how they could save people from losing their homes in foreclosure for a few $1,000s that they couldn't afford. And it was a total scam. So together with special agents from HUD, SIGTARP, and FBI, I went out to a few dozen victims' homes in the district and interviewed them about their stories, which were heartbreaking. Many had been scammed repeatedly. Gotterup and his associates had been enjoined repeatedly by other government offices, but nothing really seemed to stop them. I am grateful to work for an office that supported me in pursuing justice for those distressed homeowners by allowing me to join my colleagues in the criminal division in prosecuting these defendants. And it was one of my most rewarding experiences that we were able to secure a multi-million-dollar restitution judgment for over 1,000 of the distressed homeowners. My work on the Gotterup case led me to being asked to investigate UBS. And the opportunity to work with the largest and most talented team of attorneys and professional staff I have ever worked with, and across two offices, EDNY and NDGA. In the summer of 2014, we issued the first subpoena to UBS to investigate a massive fraud on investors in RMBS, which ultimately contributed to the 2008 financial crisis. Resolving that case a few weeks ago with my colleagues, after years of discovery and hard-fought litigation and negotiations, is one of my proudest achievements. While the UBS case, which, by the way, I did not receive a commission for, or $1.435 billion settlement, but it made headlines around the world. I've worked on and supervised many other cases that did not make as big of a splash, but were equally rewarding. From enjoining companies and individuals responsible for carrying government imposter robocalls into the country, and thank you, Judge Committee, calls that had tricked people into paying large sums of money to government impersonators, to pursuing fines and injunctions against companies that made false representations about meat, dietary supplements, and purported cures for COVID that put consumers' health at risk, to enforcing criminal restitution judgments against defendants who concealed their finances in all sorts of creative ways, like using a gourmet birthday cake delivery business to disguise extravagant personal expenses. Our work is never boring, to say the least, and I am truly excited about all the important work we continue to do. Lastly, I would like to mention how proud I am of our offices and the consumer protection team's community outreach, and especially our work to increase awareness of and prevent fraud schemes targeted at seniors and other vulnerable groups. As everyone in this room, I think, knows, the common scams we see today have become much more sophisticated than taping paper signs to trees. I encourage everyone to do your part to help protect your loved ones and those in your community from becoming victims of fraud, especially through scams perpetrated on social media, the internet, by phone, and mail. And if you would like assistance with that, please reach out to me. Thanks again to all who have supported me, and to the Stimson Medal Committee for this tremendous honor.
Okay, so the next recipient is Christopher Cafferone. Chris received his degree in accounting from the University of Notre Dame in 1997, and then spent 3 years working as an auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers before attending law school. He spent his first year of law school at Hofstra, where he finished first in his class, and then transferred to NYU School of Law and graduated cum laude. Following 5 years of work as an associate at Cravath, Swaine & Moore, Chris joined the Eastern District of New York Criminal Division in September 2008. Chris has prosecuted some of the Eastern District's most challenging and heavily litigated cases. Chris was appointed Deputy Chief of the Long Island Criminal Division in September 2017, and he also serves as the co-coordinator of the Transnational Elder Fraud Strike Force. Chris has achieved a remarkable record of success in an unusually wide range of prosecutions, including violent gang prosecutions, financial crimes, and public corruption. With respect to gang prosecutions, Chris has helped to expand the office's violent crime prosecutions on Long Island. In particular, he directed investigations with state and federal enforcement officers targeting members and associates of the Bloods street gang, which resulted in the arrest of more than 50 defendants on a range of federal charges. Chris led the investigation and trial of Lawrence Lewis, a high-ranking Bloods member addressing murder, rape, sex trafficking, and witness tampering, among many other crimes. Lewis faces mandatory life imprisonment. In addition, Chris led the prosecution of Howard Davis, the leader of the Bloods. After a 6-week trial, Davis was convicted of all 48 counts and is facing a mandatory term of more than 100 years in prison. Both racketeering trials were conducted during the COVID pandemic. Further, Chris was part of a prosecution team that convicted 21 members and associates of the Rollin 60s Crips based in Roosevelt, New York. For more than a decade, the Crips terrorized the residents of Roosevelt, a small, low-income community on Long Island, through extreme acts of violence. Following the convictions, Roosevelt went 107 days without a shooting, down from an incredible average of 2 shootings per week. In 2010, Chris led a 20-month undercover investigation of the Pagans outlaw motorcycle gang that resulted in the conviction of 15 members and associates of the Pagans, including one of the Pagans' national leaders who was responsible for overseeing the gang's activities in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The defendants were convicted of various crimes, including racketeering crimes, conspiracy, murder, assault, possession of grenades, narcotics offenses, and firearms offenses. The defendants received sentences of imprisonment ranging from 24 months to 16 years. Chris was part of the superb investigative team that solved an 8-year-old cold case involving the execution-style murder of 2 17-year-old boys in 2004. All 8 defendants admitted to their roles in the murders and pled guilty. Jason Cabral, the leader of the Netas gang, was sentenced to 40 years in jail. Chris has also been at the forefront of the Eastern District securities fraud investigations and prosecutions on Long Island. Most notably, shortly after joining the office, Chris was asked to participate in the trial of David H. Brooks and Sandra Hatfield, who were executives of a publicly traded company that supplied body armor used by the United States military and law enforcement agencies. The defendants' fraudulent schemes caused investors to lose nearly $200 million. After an 8-month trial, Brooks and Hatfield were convicted and sentenced to terms of imprisonment of 17 years and 7 years, respectively. Chris has also made significant contributions to the department's mission to investigate and prosecute corrupt public officials. For example, Chris participated in the second trial of Edward Mangano, the Nassau County executive, and his wife Linda, in a scheme to award lucrative Nassau County contracts in exchange for money, jewelry, vacations, and other items of value. While Chris did not participate in the first trial, which ended in a mistrial, he did participate in the hotly contested, very contentious retrial. And after 5 weeks of trial, Chris delivered a devastating rebuttal summation, and the jury convicted Mangano on 9 of the 12 counts and his wife on 3 of the 4 counts. So Chris has demonstrated unwavering commitment, judgment, and legal skill, which has resulted in this extraordinary record of accomplishment. In light of his exceptional public service, Chris is a most deserving recipient of the Stimson Medal. Please join me in congratulating.
Thank you, Susan, Mark, the Stimson Committee, and the New York City Bar for this wonderful honor. Thank you to Breon, Carolyn, Judy, who couldn't be here today, and the rest of the front office for your nominating me and for all your support. Receiving the Stimson is a tremendous honor, not only because of who Henry Stimson was, but also because of the impressive current and former recipients. Mark talked about them, impressive people. I'm humbled to be among them. Now, to say that my career got off to a less than Stimson start would be an understatement. So let me share a quick story that you won't find in my bio. And Mark, I understand if the Stimson decides to revisit my being awarded this after hearing this story. So on my first day in the office, after sitting through the mandatory HR, IT, and don't overthrow the U.S. government training that we all have to take, I checked my mailbox as I was instructed, and I found a new case file. Like a kid on Christmas morning, I couldn't wait to tear open that case file and find out what my first case had in store for me. So I run back to my office. It's an internal drug courier that came through JFK. Not the case of the century. It wasn't El Chapo. It wasn't going to land me in a Netflix original, but I was still super excited. Apparently, this internal drug courier was supposed to deliver the smuggled drugs to an individual named Fanu Lanu. Now, after noting to myself what an unusual name Fanu Lanu was, I moved on to my other work, went home for the day, told my wife what a great first day it was. Excited. Now, the next morning, I arrived to the office bright and early, checked my mailbox, and again, I found a second case file. This one was a credit card bust-out scheme. And when I opened this file, I couldn't believe my eyes. The main suspect's name was Fanu Lanu. Now, I thought to myself, wow, I've been assigned to investigate a criminal mastermind, a real-life Kaiser Soze. And I was flattered. I was flattered that Chief Judge Margot Brody, who at the time was my general crimes chief, entrusted me with the investigation of such a significant target. I thought to myself, she must have really seen something in me. I can't believe this. This is amazing. So naturally, I couldn't wait to share this exciting news with my GC colleagues. With my head held high, my chest pumped out, I strutted down that hallway, walked into my colleague's office, told him about Fanu Lanu, my own Kaiser Soze. Now, after laughing for what seemed like an eternity, my colleague told me Fanu Lanu, as many of you or all of you probably know in here, stands for first name unknown, last name unknown. Fanu Lanu, F-N-U-L-N-U, is an abbreviation. I said, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Chief Judge Brody's a smart lady. She wouldn't have assigned me to Kaiser Soze. So, Mark, after hearing this story, I understand if you and the committee decide to take back this beautiful Stimson medal or maybe swap it out for a smaller one. Now, the Stimson's a great honor, but one I'm uncomfortable accepting because the reason I'm standing up here is that I've been fortunate to have people in my life who have lifted me up, who have guided me, who have mentored me. There are too many to name, but I want to highlight a few. It starts with all the amazing agents and detectives that I've had the privilege of working with, like Derek Wonderland, Kevin Finnegan, Chris Brewer, Mike Fernandez, Angela Jett, Vinnie Girardi, Rich Sanamo, Mike Cassidy, John Mitchell, Derek Acker, Kristen Valencia. Their dedication, their commitment, it makes me work harder to show them I'm as committed to that shared mission, to hopefully make them proud. I also want to thank my outstanding trial partners, Jim Miskevich, Chris Ott, Rick Lunger, Nicole Bachman, Mike Maffei, Catherine Mirable, Lara Gatz, Monica Castro, and Anthony Bagnola. You all have taught me so much and helped me to become a better trial attorney. For that, I thank you. I want to give a special thanks to Mark Mazurek. Mark has had the unenviable task of working closely with me for more than 7 years. He even came into the city. This is a guy who won't come into the city for anything. And as a result, now he has to come to the city this weekend, which is torture for him. He's here today. He's had to endure multiple racketeering trials with me, including 2 trials, as Susan noted, during the COVID pandemic, which brought all kinds of challenges. And another one that ended in a mistrial because a defense attorney tampered with a witness midway through the trial. Mark is the consummate team player and trial partner. You'd all be lucky to have him on your team. And I want to thank Jim Knapp, who's sitting in the back. Jim, he volunteered to assist me in a hotly contested, time-consuming restitution hearing that was a spinoff of the David Brooks 8-month trial. No one in their right mind would volunteer to get involved in that trial. I mean, it was insane. Nobody wanted to be involved in that. But Jim did, and the incredible thing about that was Jim, despite being a civil AUSA, where restitution is not a civil function in the U.S. Attorney's Office, it's a criminal function. The criminal division AUSAs are responsible. He volunteered and then advocated to be involved in that case to help me. Jim has constantly supported his colleagues regardless of what division they're assigned to. You'll regularly see him in criminal and civil trials sitting in the gallery supporting his colleagues. I also want to acknowledge my incredible support staff, Kerry Ucci, Sam Schroeder, Susie Young, Mike Compitello, and the countless others who've made my life easier. They're the foundation of the office, and they don't receive nearly the recognition they deserve. I want to thank Rich Donahue, who somehow convinced Ben Campbell to hire me, which I suspect was no easy feat after I bombed the first-round interview in the hypo. I don't know how he did it, but Rich is a good trial attorney. And Nicole Bachman, who has always supported and encouraged me, and John Durham, who is literally the hardest-working AUSA in the Department of Justice. I'm convinced he's either a machine or he's found out a way to clone himself. His work ethic is inspiring. And Amy Busa, who's sitting over there, constantly picking up my late-night Saturday calls when I have a pressing legal issue and need some advice. Someone might want to tell her how to block cell phone numbers. That probably would get her a lot more sleep. Rich, Nicole, John, and Amy's sage advice and mentorship over the last decade and a half have been invaluable to my professional development. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank my family. They're sitting here in the first 2 rows. Without your love and support, there is no Stimson for me. That begins with my parents and my brothers and sister. At a young age, my parents instilled in my siblings and me a commitment to public service. Despite working outside the home and dealing with 4 kids who were a handful, which is putting it very mildly, my parents always found time to serve their community. They volunteered at our local church and food pantry. They taught pre-Cana to engaged couples and counseled married couples who are experiencing difficulties in their relationships. They practiced what they preached. They have been, and always will be, my moral lodestar. Finally, I want to thank my wife, Allison, and my kids, Christopher and Bella. Bella couldn't be here because she's running cross-country track. Obviously, I don't know where she gets that from. It's not from me. Being a federal prosecutor is one of the best and most rewarding jobs a lawyer can have, but it is also challenging and is at times all-consuming. We see some of the most horrific parts of humanity. Crimes against children that irreparably change you. Talking to parents who've had to bury a child due to senseless gang violence or the opioid epidemic. In this job, leaving your work at the office is easier said than done. And it's my wife who has had to sacrifice the most. But through all those long hours when I was physically absent from our home or when I was physically present but mentally in the office, she stood by my side, supported and encouraged me. For much of my time in the office, I've spent a lot of time on trial, over 2 trial years, 8-month trials. She's basically been a single mom, shuttling the kids to after-school activities, cooking, cleaning, learning Common Core math so that she could help the children with their homework. I don't know if that's still a thing, but it was brutal when it was happening. I don't know, you can't carry the one? I don't understand. Why do we have to? And this was all while working as a law professor. Allie's patience, love, and understanding is boundless. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for the kids and me. And finally, to my children, Christopher and Bella, you are my world, my inspiration. You're kind, smart, and mature beyond your years. I'm so proud of the 2 of you. So to Allie, Christopher, and Bella, I don't know what I've done to deserve the three of you, but I literally thank God every night that you're in my life. Thank you, and thank you to the committee.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, we're going to move to the Southern District Civil Division and Rebecca Saltinio. Rebecca graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude in 2000 with a BA in linguistics and German. She was awarded several postgraduate fellowships to study at the Royal College of Music in London, obtaining a Master of Music degree with distinction. She then turned her attention to law and graduated from Yale Law School in 2006. From 2006 to 2007, Rebecca clerked for the Honorable Keith P. Ellison on the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas, and she then clerked from 2007 to 2008 for the Honorable Barrington D. Parker, Jr. on the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Thereafter, Rebecca worked as an associate at Sussman Godfrey. Rebecca became an Assistant U.S. Attorney in 2012. And early on, she was a member of the team that settled a nationwide mortgage fraud litigation against Wells Fargo Bank, achieving the largest recovery ever in a Federal Housing Administration mortgage case. The investigation also revealed that Wells Fargo had intentionally concealed thousands of bad loans from HUD. The subsequent litigation was one of the most challenging and resource-intensive matters ever handled by the SDNY's Civil Division. Ultimately, the team scored a number of important legal victories, leading to a $1.2 billion settlement with public admissions of wrongdoing by Wells Fargo and one of its executives. In 2018, Rebecca became a deputy chief of the SDNY's Civil Frauds Unit and was promoted to co-chief in 2021. From 2020 to 2022, Rebecca led a team of attorneys defending the federal anti-kickback statute against Constitutional and Administrative Procedure Act claims brought by Pfizer. In this matter, where the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services, which the Inspector General characterized as one of the most significant in the agency's history, the team achieved a complete victory, both in the district court and on appeal, the latter of which Rebecca argued in the Second Circuit. In addition to her work in civil frauds, Rebecca has advocated for the government's interests in some of the most complicated programmatic cases in the office. Among other matters, she successfully defended the Affordable Care Act against a challenge to one of the signature reforms of the act, the elimination of annual and lifetime limits on the dollar value of essential health benefits provided to tens of millions of Americans. Rebecca has also represented the interests of the United States in a number of sensitive matters in the areas of foreign policy and national security. In 2021 and 2022, she coordinated numerous agencies and high-level policymakers in developing and authoring the government's statement of interest in litigation over $7 billion of Afghan central bank assets held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. She was critical in devising an interagency strategy that resulted in, among other things, $3.5 billion being released to an international trust fund to help alleviate the severe humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Rebecca has also handled notable matters in the area of civil rights. For example, she authored a statement of interest on behalf of the United States in a case brought by disability rights organizations and advocates against the City of New York, challenging the city's emergency management plans under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. After a multi-week trial and against the backdrop of the recent impact of Hurricane Sandy, the district court held that the city had violated Title II in multiple respects in the years following the city has worked to significantly improve the accessibility of its emergency plans and procedures. Rebecca has navigated some of the most difficult and sensitive cases in the Southern District and has not only demonstrated skill in all aspects of civil government litigation, but also has served as a model of ethics and integrity. And for all of those achievements, Rebecca is a highly deserving recipient of the Stimson Medal. Please join me in congratulating her.
Thank you to the New York City Bar for this honor, Susan and Mark. I've attended this ceremony almost every year since I became an AUSA, and it's always inspired and reinvigorated me. I will say for that reason it was surreal to actually speak to Mark on the phone, because I've seen you every year. I feel especially lucky to receive the medal this year, a year in which Henry Stimson appeared as a character in the blockbuster movie Barbie, I mean Oppenheimer. In the late 1920s, Stimson was the U.S. Governor General of the Philippines, the country from which my family immigrated. At the time, there was a growing national independence movement, particularly among young Filipino men who'd been able to get an education, many of them aspiring lawyers. Stimson was not entirely sure that the country was ready for self-governance. He said, "We have educated these young men too freely for white-collar jobs which do not exist. It is a quite prevalent idea among the young men that a diploma should entitle them to a place in the government." I feel some historical resonance in the fact that today I have the opportunity to be a government servant and the privilege to stand here tonight. When I started as an AUSA, my office was next door to the most popular conference room in the building, and as I nervously navigated my first days, two of the Civil Division's most talented AUSAs were using that conference room to prep for trial, and not just any trial. Our office had brought creative civil rights claims against the owner, manager, and superintendent of several residential buildings in New York who had for years sexually harassed vulnerable female tenants. And these AUSAs were getting ready to try those claims to a jury. I've had moments in my career when I encountered incredibly fierce, tenacious lawyers in the quietest, most unassuming packages. This was not one of those moments. At the time, I didn't know Jeanette Vargas and Tara Lamorte, both Stimson honorees, by the way, but I could hear their every word as they debated strategy, whipped witnesses into shape, and dropped a striking number of profanities. This experience taught me some interesting new expressions and an important lesson about the office. I learned that being an AUSA doesn't mean checking your personality at the door. The office doesn't want law bots or government drones or anyone who thinks that service means just carrying the water and doing what's expected. On the contrary, this office wants you to be a human being, to remember who you are, your own unique perspective, and your values and convictions, and to bring that to work, to question, to push back, to be a person, not just a result. When judgments are difficult and stakes are high, that is your North Star as an AUSA. When physical and moral fatigue knock on the door, you lean on your colleagues, not to tell you what's right, but to remind you that you already know. And when your colleagues are some of the most brilliant, generous, and hilarious lawyers in the country, you learn a lot about practicing law with skill, heart, and humanity. I've learned these lessons in my own work time and time again. We do a huge range of types of cases in the Civil Division, each one its own story. As an AUSA, you have to find yourself in every case, whether on the right side of the V or the left, and you have to care. Sometimes my role has been to work with my adversary and convince my client that the right thing, which I pitch as the smart thing, is to give the plaintiff relief. Sometimes my role has been to decide that it's time to stop talking and take the fight to a corporate defendant in a fraud case, even if we're not sure we'll win. On one occasion, my role was to stay up all night drafting a memo to high-level government officials, explaining why the action they were planning would violate the law, or what I believed was the clear spirit of the law. In all of those situations, I've been supported by the very best thought partners who encouraged my instincts or helped me find my way, whichever one I needed. As an institution, the Civil Division has a critical and often invisible role in maintaining the rule of law and serving justice ethically. As an individual, I always go back to why I care about this office, how this office has cared for me, and how profoundly grateful I am for all of it. I'm grateful that my mentors are all models of integrity, good conscience, and good humor. This started with the judges for whom I clerked, Keith Allison and Barrington Parker, and continued with my SD&Y supervisors. Thank you to my first deputy, David Jones, also now on the bench, and to my chiefs, Andrew Schilling, Sarah Shudovsky, and Jeff Ostreicher. I will pause for a moment on Jeff. That thing I said about the fiercest, most tenacious lawyers and the most unassuming packages, that's Jeff. Thank you for everything you've done for us. I'll always be grateful to Preet Bharara, who hired me, and to the other U.S. attorneys who protected our office when it took real courage to do so: June Kim, Jeff Berman, and Audrey Strauss. Of course, I also thank Damian Williams, who gets a lot of credit for nominating me for this award, because the last time someone handed me a mic in a large room full of AUSAs, I was roasting him. I'm grateful that this job enables me to keep growing and learning. Joining the Civil Frauds Unit has pushed me to be more creative and strategic, and gave me the opportunity to help facilitate the incredible, innovative work our AUSAs do to combat fraud. Thank you to my righteous, crafty, and always entertaining fellow CIFU chiefs, Pierre Armand, Jeff Powell, and Jake Bergman, and to the AUSAs and staff of the CIFU, past and present. As I mentioned earlier, my parents, Lita and Ferdy, and my siblings, Jake and Rowena, all immigrated to the United States and became naturalized citizens. As the baby and only natural-born American in the family, I was very high maintenance, and I owe them so much for sending me down the path that led me here. My mother is here with my extended family, thank you. My father was himself once a young, politically minded Filipino studying law, and it's a shame he missed this, because one of his favorite hobbies was photographing me awkwardly accepting diplomas and prizes. It's daunting to try to thank the rest of my SD&Y family, because there's no way I can name everyone who has helped me as I try to be a better lawyer and to normalize crying in the office. Truthfully, it is all of you. The SD&Y could not be in better hands, and neither could I. I do have to single out two extraordinary friends I came up with from the beginning: Andrew Krause, who's now also a judge, but who has never judged me, and Jess Hu, a true advocate with the very biggest heart. Last, to our office's newer attorneys, one of my greatest professional joys is working with and learning from you. As proud as I am to receive this award, this recognition is really for the Civil Division. And day in and day out, that means you. Your talent, grit, and gallows humor. Never doubt that you know deep down what's right, and never stop supporting each other. Thank you for this honor.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about your mom, Tara Lamort. Listen carefully. Tara is a 15-year veteran of the Southern District. She is that rare AUSA who, having served for 9 years in the Civil Division, including time as the Deputy Chief of the Civil Rights Unit, has now served an additional 6 years in the Criminal Division, where she currently serves as Chief of the Money Laundering and Transnational Criminal Enterprises Unit. After receiving her undergraduate degree in biology from Stanford in 2000, Tara attended NYU School of Law, where she graduated in 2003 as a member of the Order of the Coif. She then clerked for Judge Franklin S. Van Antwerp in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania and for Judge Robert E. Cowan in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. In 2005, immediately following her clerkships, Tara began her public service career at the Department of Justice's Federal Programs Branch as part of the department's honors program. In 2008, Tara joined the Southern District Civil Division. Shortly following her arrival, the office tapped her to represent the United States in Ray Chrysler LLC, a bankruptcy case in which the U.S. financed the sale of substantially all of Chrysler's assets in an effort to preserve jobs and support the economy. The proposed Chrysler sale was vigorously opposed, and rarely has a matter of such critical national importance been litigated on such an expedited basis. Tara helped defend the government from accusations that the Auto Task Force had engaged in bad faith and collusive behavior in brokering the sale transaction. The bankruptcy court ultimately approved the sale. Tara then successfully defended the appeal taken from the final sale order. The Second Circuit ordered that the briefing be completed within 48 hours, with arguments scheduled for the very next day. Tara persuaded the circuit to affirm the bankruptcy court's order from the bench, and the sale was consummated. Next, Tara took the lead in another extraordinary matter, this one involving Freedom of Information Act requests for records regarding the treatment of individuals detained after September 11, 2001, and held in custody outside of the United States. That litigation spanned 14 years, approximately 7 of which Tara served as the lead counsel. While the district court ordered disclosure on appeal, the Second Circuit, following public oral argument and an ex parte in-camera classified session expertly handled by Tara, ruled that the court must defer to the executive's national security judgment and that release of the disputed information would cause extremely grave national security harm. In the fall of 2017, Tara transferred to the office's criminal division, where she continued to pursue cutting-edge matters. In United States versus Akavan, Tara secured hard-fought convictions of 2 defendants who orchestrated a complex, multiple-year fraud scheme involving more than $150 million of illegal purchases of marijuana. A 4-week trial occurred during the height of the pandemic and was the only federal criminal trial proceeding in the country at the time. Rebecca secured convictions of both defendants and then on appeal obtained an affirmance of the defendants' convictions and a reversal of the district judge's denial of the government's forfeiture request. Tara has successfully handled a number of other significant matters, including the indictment of Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska and his facilitators for sanctions violations and other offenses in which he led efforts to ultimately pierce the layers of shell companies and straw men that Deripaska used in his effort to evade sanctions and avoid law enforcement scrutiny. In 2022, following a 4-year investigation, Tara helped negotiate a groundbreaking criminal resolution with Danske Bank, a global financial institution based in Denmark. Danske Bank pled guilty to conspiring to commit bank fraud, forfeited over $2 billion, and agreed to implement and maintain a revamped compliance program and AML controls. And in the spring of 2022, the office selected Tara to serve as co-chief of the Money Laundering and Transnational Criminal Enterprises Unit. Additionally, Tara serves as one of the office's 3 asset forfeiture coordinators. Last fiscal year, the office led all U.S. attorneys' offices in the nation, and this fiscal year, Tara has so far overseen the forfeiture of approximately $1.4 billion. Among the many cases that Tara has supervised are also included the investigation and filing of bank fraud and unlicensed money transmission charges against former CEO of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, and seizure of criminally derived assets valued at approximately $800 million. The criminal forfeiture of Bitcoin, worth approximately $3 billion at the time of seizure, traceable to Silk Road, a black market illegal services platform involved in money laundering, and the seizure of jets of Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich pursuant to a novel legal theory under the Export Control Reform Act. In summary, both as a line assistant and civil rights deputy chief in the Southern District's Civil Division, and then as a line assistant and high-level supervisor in the office's criminal division, and also a mom, Tara has worked tirelessly to ensure that justice is served with compassion, with fairness, and good judgment. So for all of these reasons, I am delighted to present Tara with the Stimson Medal. Please join me in congratulating.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mark. I am so grateful to be here, and I'm humbled by the company. So thank you to the New York City Bar Council for this incredible honor, and thanks to all of you for attending this event. So I've known about this award for approximately 15 years, as long as I've been at the SDNY. Not only because it embodies why all of us are here, a strong commitment to public service, but because it recognizes both sides of the house, one civil AUSA and one criminal AUSA. And I have had the great fortune of seeing how both sides of the house operate. Now, there are some differences for sure. So when I was thinking about that, 2 immediate ones popped to mind. I remember first when I got to the criminal division, I sat down with my general crimes chiefs, and they were giving me the lay of the land. And one of the things that they said was, quote, "The government is always ready." I was like, what does that mean? We don't get extensions? They said, no extension requests. We're ready no matter what. I was like, what? Let me tell you, in the civil division, I was a pro at getting extension requests. And the second difference that jumped to mind, well, let's just say that the criminal division has a whole different level of ego going on. Love you guys, love you. But there are 2 qualities that, in my opinion, both sides of the house share. They are the 2 qualities that brought me here and kept me here for the last 15 years, a commitment to fairness and a commitment to excellence. And those commitments resonate with me particularly. I grew up in Ronkonkoma, right in the middle of Long Island, down the street from a railroad station. My dad worked at Con Edison, and my mom was a bank teller at Chase for more than 35 years. And I was the first member of my family to graduate from college. And what I learned growing up there was that fairness is important. It's important to give everyone a fair shake, no matter what their financial status is, no matter what their clout, no matter what their station in life. It is this quality that I have felt most strongly about, even as a young child, the one I felt most viscerally, the one I find myself coming back to time and again. Does this course of action seem like the right thing? Is it fair? Is it sufficient but not greater than necessary, to coin a phrase? My 2 kids, Ella and Ethan, are here tonight. There's Ethan. In our house, we have a strong bias towards fairness. For them right now, it primarily manifests itself in the size of their dessert. But seriously, we focus on fairness with them, and some people will say, well, to kids, well, hey, life just isn't fair, and I've always thought that was a terrible thing to say to kids. Of course, life isn't always fair, but in the ways that we control, we should strive to make it more fair. That can mean different things in different situations. But I think this is what the SDNY does in all parts of the office. All of us are always striving to get it right, no matter how easy or how difficult that may be in a particular circumstance. The second quality that I think unites the civil and criminal sides of the SDNY is a commitment to doing an excellent job on every single thing that we do. I love being part of an organization responsible for such incredibly high-quality work product on such a consistent basis, on such complicated cases. SDNY is not afraid to push the envelope. We are not afraid to take appropriate risks. We are not afraid to be creative when the circumstances call for it. I have seen these qualities in every corner of our collective docket. On the civil side, one case I'll mention is Goodman versus United States. This is an NYPD officer who is also in the military, and he brought to us a complaint that the city was reducing his pension benefits in violation of a law that prohibits discrimination against service members. We took that case, we filed a civil complaint, and the city's response was to stonewall and throw up every barrier possible, including filing harassing counterclaims against the service members. I was like, all right, so that's how you want to play this? Bring it. So we dug, and I remember going to David Kennedy, who was a civil rights chief, is still a civil rights chief, and being like, let's turn this into a class action for all service members of the NYPD. So we did that. And then I had a colleague, Arastu Chaudhary, who came onto the case, and he was like, why are we limiting ourselves to service members in the NYPD as opposed to getting relief for service members who are employed by any city agency across the entire city? So we did that too. And as a team, we thought big, we were creative, and we were appropriately aggressive, and we helped every single service member employed by the city. Now, on the criminal side, you've heard I've done a significant amount of work prosecuting financial institutions and money laundering. These are extremely hard cases, and they are rewarding in many ways, including the relationships that I formed with other people in the office and with people throughout DOJ that share the same talent and the same mission as we do. But the one that I want to talk about tonight is a prosecution I did when I was in narcotics, and that was a prosecution against Dr. Joseph Oliveri. We knew that he was the 5th largest distributor of opioids in New York State, but all we had at the time was an unlawful distribution of testosterone case, and so we charged that. And that was based on an undercover going in and asking for big muscles, testosterone. Charged, and that is that our undercover officer had, get this, low testosterone. He actually had low testosterone, so these prescriptions were technically legitimate. So what did we do? We doubled down. We certainly were not going to back away from a doctor that was fueling the opioid crisis. So working with my colleagues hand in hand and diligent members of law enforcement, we found patients that had visited and came in for legitimate medical services, but by the end, sadly, walked out as opioid addicts. So through quick and aggressive investigation, we cracked open an opioid ring, and we secured a conviction for opioid distribution on the doctor and his conspirators. It was gratifying to work with such a dedicated, mission-driven team to remove a dirty doctor off the streets. It has been a consistent through line of my career here that the tremendous results that we have achieved are a function of teamwork. I have been able to work with and learn from lawyers who create phenomenal cases, who are creative yet careful, who are always striving to be fair and just, and who hold themselves to the same high standards that we expect of others. And when they make a mistake, they admit it and they learn from it. And so to be the recipient of this honor in this group, both sides of the SDNY community, really means a lot to me. So this is my opportunity to say thank you to all of my U.S. attorneys, my chiefs, my colleagues, and my friends for mentoring me, supporting me, having my back to be innovative, to stand up for what's right under tough circumstances, to work together to bring cutting-edge cases. That is special. That is why we are able to bring cases that have significant impact on individuals, in communities, across the nation, and sometimes worldwide. And finally, and most significantly, I need to thank my family. My mom. My mom always told me that I didn't know this was going to happen. I could do whatever I put my mind to if I worked hard enough for it. I have her to thank for this mindset, which has enabled me to overcome any obstacle that comes in my way. My dad led by example. He went to ground zero to help in the aftermath of 9/11 and made huge sacrifices for this country. I also have him to thank for my attitude of, if it's the right thing, you just do it, and then you can always apologize later approach, which has largely served me well. Grizz, the Deputy U.S. Attorney, you did not hear that. We're all good. Nothing is blown up yet. And finally, I need to thank my husband, Zach, and my kids, Ella and Ethan, for all the sacrifices they have made for me to do this job. Ella and Ethan, thank you for understanding when I can't be at all of your school activities. My hope for you is that you understand how meaningful it is to have a job where your goal is to make a positive impact every day. And Zach, can't even look at you right now, you are my best friend in the world. You are my greatest supporter. I spoke a lot today about how great it is to be in AUSA on both sides of the House, and it is. But of course, that's not how it is every day. Some days are hard, some days suck, some days I am overwhelmed, angry at everyone, underwater. I've made mistakes and beat myself up over it, and you have always been there to guide me through. So I could not do this without you. So I'll end with this. Former AUSAs always say to stay in the office as long as you can, and it's because this job is really a luxury. Yes, some days are hard, but we have tremendous power to do what's right and to make a real difference. And in today's times, government service in the way that we do it is more important than ever. So let's continue to do it. Again, everyone, thank you for this honor and good night. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Join us and for all of the great 4 individuals who won this year's award. Just briefly, I want to echo Judge Committee's remarks and those of Susan. And speaking to the AUSAs in these offices, you truly are on the front line of defending the rule of law. And we want to encourage you all, on behalf of the City Bar, the Stimson Committee, to continue this work, to preserve those principles and traditions, including integrity and independence. We want to express our appreciation to the City Bar and its staff for making this ceremony possible. We want to thank you all for coming, and we hope you'll join us in a celebration next door. And thanks very much. We greatly appreciate it.